Hello and welcome to the Warhammer YouTube channel. Today we'll be talking about Warcry, the new skirmish combat game set in the Age of Sigmar universe, and we'll be specifically talking about the Flesh Eater Courts faction. We'll be using some math and statistics to come up with some initial list build ideas before the meta gets in full swing and the game gets very competitive. So with that being said, let's look at the data. Alright, so what I have here is a quick legend before I get into the spreadsheet containing the actual values. This will show you, I'll have several different cells that will be colored different values. What the cell is colored is going to be based on how the value in that cell relates to all the fighters across the entire game. So if we take all of the stats in the game and plot them out on a bell curve, they roughly come out to what you see here, and it doesn't fit perfectly to the curve, but you can see things that are colored blue are generally better. Things that go more red are worse. So you can refer back to this part of the video if you had any questions on what a color meant. Okay, so before I get started, let me hide these rows. So I typically start these videos by talking a little bit about the warband as a whole, and then I talk about the bosses, and then I talk about our troop choices, and then give an idea of what I think the most valuable player is, and then I'll give you some example list ideas. So this warband as a whole is, I think, a very elite warband. Even though you do have a chaff option, I think most of the times with this warband you're going to see it played in reality. I think you're going to see generally low model counts from people playing this warband, and that's because the elites are just great. So the chaff option here isn't the worst chaff in the game by any stretch, but the elites are really intriguing. So it tends to pull you in that direction, but the elites are there to kind of fill in the gaps that are going to be left over in your list building. That's one of the problems with a warband with so many high value fighters, is that it's hard to make a list that makes full use of all your points. So I did the best I can with the list ideas that I'll throw out at the end, but it's not perfect. I wasn't able to get a good list that came out to exactly 1,000 points. So I hate leaving those points on the table. Okay. So let's talk about our bosses. And the things I'm going to say about these three boss choices. So we have three boss choices, and then we have three troop choices, and the decisions between them are kind of the same. So we're making the same decision-making process between the boss choices and the troop choices. So we have three choices. We have the Crypt Infernal, the Crypt Haunter, and the Crypt Ghast. And everything in this faction starts with the word crypt, so I think I'm just going to stop saying crypt. So the Infernal is the choice we're making here. He's the most expensive, but he's move 10 with fly. So that's absolutely huge. It's one of the fastest moves in the game, plus you add fly on top of it. This thing is a highly mobile creature. And if you notice, there are 40 wounds, a massive 40 wounds. Even at toughness 4, 40 wounds is really tough to beat. He is not the most durable unit in the game. The 35 wound, toughness 5, Iron Jaws brute boss is a little bit more durable, but he's very close with those 5 extra wounds. Okay, so that's the main advantage, I think, of the Infernal. The Crypt Haunter, you notice you're paying 45 fewer points. He doesn't have fly, and he doesn't have those 4 inches of extra move. His move is still above average. This isn't a slow option by any stretch, but you're not really paying all 255 points for a fast troop. And the Crypt Ghast is just cheap. He doesn't stand out in any of these stats departments. He's just a cheap option. So let's scroll a little bit. Let's examine the damage profiles here. Everything is range 1. The entire faction is range 1, so there's no shooting or distance at all. Very hefty attacks value, attacks 5, crit 5 over here. If you saw my strength and toughness video, you know that those are my favorite two stats on this line, and you can imagine these are going to be heavy damage dealers based on those numbers. The Crypt Ghast, he does okay damage, but he's for 125 points. I guess he's okay, but nothing compared to these other two. All right, the runes. This is where the distinction is going to come in. So the Infernal, he's very expensive. He takes the Agile and the Fly rune, and the Haunter takes the Elite. I want to hop over and talk about those runes real quick. I usually don't talk about the runes until the troop section, but our troop choices very closely match their boss choices, so might as well talk about it now. Okay. This Agile, so that the Infernal choice, the Agile it's an okay double. It adds 1 to the strength, which isn't really that interesting, considering especially a lot of your troops that you're probably going to field are going to be strength 4. You get not that much benefit going from strength 4 to strength 5 in this game. But if you were going with a ghoul heavy force that's all strength 3, you get a proportionally bigger benefit of buffing strength 3 fighters up to strength 4. So yeah, the adding 1 to strength isn't where the value of this double comes in. The value of the double would be, I think, in the fact that if you do score a critical, then the fighter that you attacked cannot make a move or disengage action. So, if you're swarming around somebody, as long as one of your fighters got this off, then that person would be stuck engaging with your devouring pack of crypt whatevers. So somewhat okay ability. It is interesting to note that there's no summoning in this warband. Everything has access to this double ability, which is an additional. It's a healing ability, so it's fairly nice. So it's to complement respite. So respite, you can't use it while you're within 1 inch of enemy fighters, and this one it can be used in that scenario, but it's limited to only after you've taken down an enemy fighter. So you have more options in this warband to heal yourself than other warbands do. That's kind of their thing. Since there's no summoning, you got to just try to use the feeding frenzy, I guess, and respite as much as possible. All right, but the real kicker here. I should mention there's this other. Agile gets this other triple ability. It's just a direct damage dealer, but yeah. The elite ability here, I think, is particularly notable. It's actually maybe a bit of a game changer, and it levels the playing field a little bit between our two elite troop choices. So it adds 2 to the attack characteristic. So as long as they're within 6 inches of the leader. So that's huge, and it's only a double. So it does have some limitations, but the fact that it's only a double, as we'll see here in a bit, when we slide over to the actual damage output, that really bumps this thing into pretty stratospheric amounts of damage. So the Infernal, he's the more expensive boss. He does not have access to that crazy damage dealing rune, the elite rune, but he does move extremely well and flies. So that's something to note. All of the prices per wound are not bad. Actually, our 2 expensive ones are actually quite good for their durability. And how that works out, given their toughness value, their actual price per attacks to kill, still very, very good. The gas starts to get a little bit pricey, but for leaders, these are all good price values, and it's just very, very intriguing values for the Infernal and the Haunters for durability. Okay, now I want to talk about damage output, because damage output is this is Flesh Eater Court's thing in this game, it seems. It's all about doing this damage. So the Ghast is actually the most efficient points-wise for the damage he does, but for a leader, he only does 4.39, so he's just not a big damage dealer. And so even if you wanted to bring a warband that was all chaff and like a Crypt Ghast just to have maximum number of models on the table, I think it's important to to have something in your warband that can just straight up deal a lot of damage in a single activation. And also having some units on your warband that are durable is also a good idea. So I'm not quite as in favor of the Crypt Ghast, even though like on stats here his damage looks pretty affordable. The fact that the Infernal here is able to get this much damage output at this price while moving 10 with fly is just, and his durability is the price that it is for being a move 10 fly model. I mean, if you plot this guy and you compare him to other fast moving flying things in the game, there's just no comparison. He's probably, probably should have done the actual math, but he's probably the best flying value in the game. Okay. And the Crypt Haunter, he doesn't fly and he doesn't move all that fast, but he moves okay. And you get a little bit better value for his points per damage. This is only the base damage, though. And I think this was what I was saying with the abilities. The reason that these are a little bit closer of an option in my mind is that this Chosen of the King ability is only a double. And you can see it brings you from 7.65 average damage to 10.71. So he gets you into a next level of damage. Using regular Onslaught is 9.18. So you know everybody has access to Onslaught, but only the elite here is going to have access to Chosen of the King. It's the same price, and obviously since he is the leader, he's never going to be not eligible to use that ability. So that's a guaranteed. Anytime you get a double, you can dish out 10.71 average damage. So you have 45 points to make a decision here between these two. I think value-wise, probably the Infernal is still worth it, even though he's 300 points, just because there's just nothing in the game that it has this good of stats while moving that quickly with fly. It's just a little bit crazy, and yeah. But I would put the Haunter still as a very nice option for his points. So moving on to the troops, let me just go ahead and hide these bosses. And we see the exact same thing happening here. We have the fast-moving flying elite, the Crypt Flayer, the okay-moving elite horror, and the just cheap ghoul. So we have to make that same choice. Our two elites are, and I say elite just in terms of category troop, not the elite rune. They're both 30 wounds, so these are very durable models. Toughness 4 with 30 wounds is very nice. And yeah. Okay, so our points per wound, you can see, is pretty good all across the table. Points per average attack to kill, you can see this kind of flips a little bit because of the low toughness of the ghoul. He's actually a little bit below average for his points. That's why I don't think he's particularly noteworthy chaff, but this Crypt Flayer is very noteworthy for being a fast-moving flying model with this kind of durability for this price. There's just no drawback to it. Yes, he doesn't do quite as much damage as the Horror due to the Horror's elite ability, but every other time in this game where you have two relatively similar-looking profiles and one of them moves significantly faster or has fly, the prices shift dramatically, and this is not a terribly dramatic shift. It's actually pretty worth it for what he does. You can see here I've calculated the effective damage on average for these troops. These are nice, comfortably above average. Not the best in the game, but they are firmly in that elite territory of damage output. But the prices you're paying for just their base damage are a little on the high side. And like I said, the fact that this guy can take the Chosen of the King ability makes this slightly below average point efficiency on his damage a little bit kind of a non-issue, because he's able to just dish it out with, I think he'll be doing, 6 attacks per activation with this. So very nice. And the ghoul, just okay price for what he does damage wise, but it's just a low damage value, and you're not going to be able to fit that many of them into most lists. So I think a lot of this, if you read the abilities here, a lot of things are, you know, like the healing ability is after you've killed an enemy. So this is a damage focused warband, and things are wanting to happen when you kill. So I think this army just kind of favors more of the elites than the chaff. I could be wrong. Somebody out there might play a competitive chaff-oriented flesh eater courts, but I'm just not. I'm not getting that impression reading through the data. Okay. So I'll expand all of my choices here, and I will talk about my favorite MVPs. And then I'll give you some list building ideas. So this is a very easy warband to cover. There wasn't a whole lot of tricky data in there. And like I said, since the boss options match the troop options, we really only have three things to consider. You have the fast things, which is the Infernal and the Flayer. You have the elite things, the elite damage, which is the Haunter and the Horror, and then you just have the cheap things, which aren't that great at anything, but they're cheap, and that's the Ghast and the Ghoul. So for me, the MVP would be the fast options, so, you know, the Infernal and the Flayer. So the reason I'm giving this the MVP is just it's a little bit of an outlier in this game, the fact that you're not really having to pay too much of a penalty for being so fast with fly. Fast, flying, durable, heavy damage dealing. Yes, he's expensive, but it seems the math checks out. It's absolutely a good value for what he's going to be able to do on the tabletop. So that being said, like, you could build a great list without taking either one of those and dominate. So a lot of goodness in this warband. That being said, I think there is ways to build a bad warband here. I think if you went all Ghast and ghouls, you'd be a little bit disappointed by this faction. So I'm gonna give you three list building ideas, and I'll give you my two. I'll start from my least favorite of the three and work towards my most favorite of the three. Okay, so my least favorite of the three would be just a pure speed oriented. So this would be taking the Infernal as your boss, 2 Flayers. So that's all three of those currently are your fast moving options. And then just, I wish you could fit in more elites in here somewhere, but you really don't, the points don't work out too great. You want to try to maintain some sort of model count. So I'm going to fill out the rest of the list with 4 ghouls. So I don't like having to fill out that much of the points, but that's what I had to do here. It just didn't feel right with the other option would have been like 1 horror and 1 ghoul with that combination, but it just didn't. I think given those number of models, I think I'd rather take the 4 ghouls on the table. So, all right. Next option would be a pure elite damage, so maximizing the use of that elite rune. And this would be, the boss would be the Haunter. So he's the elite rune carrying variant of the boss. He's also a little cheaper. It would be 3 horrors. So each one of those is a heavy damage dealer. And then filling out the rest of the list with 3 ghouls. Okay. So both of those 2 lists that I just showed you come out to 990 in points. So you're only leaving 10 points left on the table. Almost every list I could possibly build ended up leaving points on the table. So I had to leave something. My favorite of the 3 lists, though, is going to come out to 980 points, and that's going to be kind of a balance between the speed and the elite rune, and that would be the Infernal boss. So the boss is going to be able to move very quickly and fly, scoot around the board, and support combat and take objectives and things as needed. And then the troops we would fill out with 3 horrors. So they're all going to be elite rune taking. So they're not going to be as fast as the boss, but the boss should be able to scoot around and get around to support them as needed, because the elite rune is going to depend on proximity to that leader. So I think I think this is a flexible choice that's going to leave you enough points to fill out the rest of the list with 2 ghouls. So it really bugs me having to fill out the list with ghouls, but that's why I think I maybe tend towards this list the best, because there's less wasting time with these chaff ghouls, because the chaff really isn't notable for this faction. It's really these just awesome elite choices you have are really the feature. But this is enough chaff to ensure body count, because there is some body count related objectives. So you're going to have a little bit of body count, and you're going to have enough damage dealing that when you're up against warbands that have much better body count, you can hopefully use your superior damage dealing ability and the superior move and fly of your leader to drain their numbers quickly and hopefully not lose that match. So it's going to be I really like this faction of all the death factions. I think this is probably my personal favorite, the one I would probably play. But that being said, it's also a little bit similar to orcs. Like this is kind of the Ironjawz version of death. But that being said, if you compare this directly to Ironjawz, they seem to stack up much better just from a stats perspective. Like in the Ironjawz, everything looks great until you get to that move column. And in the move column, everything's 3, so you're clearly paying a heavy toll for that slow movement. All the other stats look good. In this faction, it doesn't seem to be costing you much. You're not paying. You're getting your cake and eating it too here with this fast movement, with all of the rest of the stats being comparatively good. So really like this faction. I think this is going to be a popular one and doing very well in the meta currently. We'll see how it shakes out though. Still very early on in this game. So that's all I have for you today, and see you next time.